Greetings, everyone. My name is Robin Paisley. I've been asked to act as host for this session. I'm from the Mentor Hub that deals with accreditation, and I'm deputising for my colleague Holly, who's not able to be here today. I used to be in the Air Force, and it's particularly exciting for me to welcome the team from Resilient Pilot, who have received and achieved a Gold ISMCP award from EMCC Global. ISMCP, for those who are not familiar with the acronym, is an international standard for mentoring and coaching programs, and achieving gold is a real accolade for Resilient Pilot. It's a framework for organizational excellence, and so it's a pleasure to welcome the Resilient Pilot crew to this Global Provider Summit. And I hand over to them.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Robin. We're delighted to be here for this session. I bring with me a fantastic team. We're a virtual team, primarily at Resilient Pilot. We've got Sam Sloan, who's one of our directors, and Joanna Hooper, who'll be talking shortly, and Matt, who's one of our team members. And you'll see it's a partnership we have with Matt. Actually, he's from the Flight Path Training. He's also a mentor, but also he's introduced some scenario-based training software, which we use to facilitate our continuous professional development and competencies. We're here today to talk about the evolution of Resilient Pilot, and what we hope to share is a new approach to resilience development in the aviation industry, which is essentially pioneering continuous personal and professional development. And let's hold on to the word continuous, because we don't do a tick box approach. It's really about continuous investment in behaviors and competencies. As with our team of mentor coaches, the continuous development as mentor coaches with the EMCC 8 competencies. I'll say no more because I know Sam's got some interactivity later on for you. So moving on, we've got three key pillars of resilience. We define resilience as the individual building the personal confidence through mentoring and coaching primarily. Building the professional competence as pilots, there are 9 competencies. Building those professional competencies through virtual scenario-based training as learning and development opportunities, and also workshops, virtual scenario-based workshops, which are delivered by a qualified competency-based training instructor. Apologies, this is the aviation world. It's full of acronyms. So just if I don't describe the acronym, stick it in chat and Matt will be able to explain it for you. So basically, the connections bit is the virtual bit. We were born out of the pandemic, which meant there was only one way we could really help support our pilot community who were being displaced, and that was using virtual methods such as Zoom, Wix, and online programs. But 3 key areas. We define resilience as empowering the pilot to develop their personal confidence, the competence, and the connections. And we provide and facilitate a platform through mentoring, through a combination, a blended approach of mentoring, coaching, and competency-based training and development. Introductions. Well, I suppose I'll go first. Stuart Beach is one of the founders and CEO of Resilient Pilot, also a pilot on the A380 with British Airways. I went through Sam's individual qualification course, the EQA. Still got to finish the last bits and bobs of that, but certainly done the theory side of it for the practitioner side of the mentoring and coaching. And it's with great pleasure that I introduce Sam to you.
Yeah, thank you, Stu. I have a leadership and coaching background myself. I'm a senior practitioner coach at EMCC, and I'm also an EQA provider, which of course is the course that Stu mentioned that we went through. I joined Resilient Pilot not long after they'd started, sort of June, July 2020, because I knew that they were offering free coaching and mentoring services. And I thought, do you know what? I love aviation myself, and it would be a great opportunity for me to get involved in this organisation. And two and a half years later, as they say, the rest is history. But there is another director here, who is Johanna Hooper, and I will allow her to introduce herself as well.
You didn't tee me up properly. Normally you say you're an aviation nut, and I'm the one who goes, I'm the weirdo in the group because I don't know anything about aviation and I'm not an aviation nut. I'm the last one to join the directors team. I'm a bit like Sam. I've got a leadership and development and coaching and mentoring and even mediation background. And I joined Resilient Pilot, I don't know, about 18 months ago as a mentor. I joined as part of my give back to, obviously the aviation industry was one of the ones most heavily affected by the pandemic. My background way back when is I'm also in the military. So some of the ways of being, some of the issues that affect them are still very resonant from my time in the military. And I focus on helping us have the best team possible to deliver what it is that Resilient Pilot want us to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, would you like to introduce yourself as well? Because you're going to be doing a live demonstration with Stuart in a little while.
Sure, yes. As Stuart said, I'm Matt from Flight Path Training, and my background is training. So I have a training company. We do a lot of online training and software. And I actually worked with one of the other founders, Karen Barth, in the past. So when Resilient Pilot was first born, they asked me to come on board. Started off as a mentor, and the relationship has grown from there, and we're taking it through. And I do a lot of the technical training side when it comes to the technical competencies. And yeah, like Sam said, the rest's history from there, really.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, Claire and Lee can't make it today. They're on Claire's on leave, and Lee is on a command upgrade course, but they are key directors here that help us evolve and forge into the organisation and evolve that we've become. So let's talk about our journey and purpose. What do you notice on the right there? What do you see? Well, that's what we were faced with. That was our industry. March 2020. This was what was happening to pilots, to crew in particular. And Karen and I, as Matt mentioned, we had a phone call and said, we're actually in a project to help next generation aviation professionals, which is where we're kind of back onto that trajectory. But we sort of said, well, hang on a minute. We've got a lot of pilots who have been displaced, made redundant. We've got some pilots who have just finished the training with £100,000 loans, with the stress of actually not being able to get a job. But we've also got a number of pilots who still got a job, all right, on furlough, like myself, but how could we use and transfer those knowledge, skills to those pilots and keep them engaged, keep them connected with the industry? And that's where we set up Resilient Pilot. And so how are we going to do it? Because we can't meet up in person. So we set up a virtual platform, and it was kind of informal then, informal mentoring and coaching, initially mentoring, just to help those pilots, keep them engaged. And that's where we started, really. So we just got 10 pilots together, myself and Karen, and started just promoting on social media, things like I said, who needs support with the current situation that we're in. So Resilient Pilot was born out of the pandemic. And 2.5 years later, through many iterations, the vision was just come to fruition. And that's what we do. It's a few important words there. It's that evidence-based, and you'll see why in a minute, evidence-based blended approach to mentoring, coaching and training. And you'll see why there's a number of competencies for the mentor coaches, but also the instructors later on, that Sam will take you through, which are harmonized. And resilience development. Resilience isn't something that you just do one day and it lasts forever. It's a continuous investment in behaviors to build the resilience into those behaviors and adaptive capacity, as it says there, to enhance that human performance. So that's where we're coming from today. Virtual, really important, because everything we do is obviously virtual. What other industries, going to ask you a question now, if you can pop in chat. What other industries were similarly impacted? Was your industry impacted by the pandemic? And what did you do to diversify? A bit of audience participation. Please pop your thoughts into chat and we can have a look. Be really interested to see which other industries were impacted. And Sam always tells me, and Sam's always taught me, the 10-second rule of silence. So I'm going to start the stop clock. Thanks, Carolyn. European public sector. Pivot to virtual. That's a really nice word, isn't it, actually? The hospitality sector, absolutely. Nicola, I work in communications, and that was amplified. Can you expand on that, Nicola? The amplification. Does that mean there was more work involved? Hospitality. So we've got Madeline and Emmanuel, hospitality. And so you mentioned hospitality. What did you do about it? How did you pivot, diversify? Johanna's saying a stepdaughter had an apprenticeship at a falconry that was ended overnight and closed to visitors. Are they back up and running? Yeah.
Do you want to step in and talk about the how that was amplified in regards to the communications?
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. From my point of view, there was I had a lot of clients who now needed to change what they were doing, whether they had to communicate quickly with their own clients to tell them about the new protocols they had in place, or to provide reassurance, or to put in internal communication schemes as well, so that their employees knew what was now expected of them in this new strange normal that was coming, and the switch from being in the office to virtual working, and then what that was, and the new protocols and the new ways of working. So that was the thing which I personally noticed.
Yeah, and of course the transition to virtual, when you're not used to it, what sort of challenges does that bring with it?
There were some really interesting challenges, actually, and pressures on the various organisations' leaders as well, actually, as to how they then support those people, I'd say, Stuart. Yeah,
exactly. And I think the next slide, we've got a slide somewhere, I think, which hopefully leads on. Hold that thought, what's unique about us? Because actually we were born in the pandemic, so we only know virtual. So our challenge is actually meeting up in person, because we've got a team of global members. So next question then, just to get the minds thinking, what did we see them do to respond and diversify to support the people? I think you've answered that quite nicely, actually. But what about the hospitality, Madeline? In the hospitality, you mentioned what happened there? What diversification?
This is an interesting question, isn't it, Stu? Because quite a few people have put hospitality earlier, Emmanuel, Madeline, Eileen, etc. How did hospitality have to maintain themselves? Because it had literally gone overnight. They couldn't have people in the restaurants, certainly at the beginning, etc. And it's really interesting in regards to how they did diversify and actually keep their businesses alive. Absolutely, Eileen, yeah.
It was, well, I think, along with hospitality, as well as education, as another industry, universities and higher education, they're another industry that were significantly impacted, and how they then decided to move forward.
And it's not, and education was probably successful, weren't they, in the fact that they went virtual, but in the hospitality,
I think, like somebody said, almost every industry, everybody was affected by pandemic, not only hospitality. But hospitality actually, I think we gave that comment because we are looking at the one that was hit. So aviation was affected heavily, and hospitality. But I think we are talking about resilience. How did they adapt to that experience? Most of the restaurants started preparing contacting the customers directly, and of course they began to. I think if you go to the US, that is where there's home delivery service really sprung up. increased, and we began to experience a boom in the delivery services. So we're preparing packed foods and, of course, selling that directly to the clients and the customers. I think that was the way out in the struggle to survive the pandemic.
Absolutely.
And every other person's also found a way to survive.
Absolutely. And Eileen's reflected that as well. You've mentioned exactly the same thing. So actually, they found an opportunity to help and to diversify.
Actually, it's an opportunity. That is why what they say, in every crisis, there's an opportunity. I think, for example, those of us in the coaching world, you're also affected, but that is where the virtual coaching came up, and it seems to be prospering now.
Yes, and that's what we did essentially. Thank you for your inputs. Really some good stuff there. So just to take you through the timeline. Resilient Pilot was created in March 2020 virtually. We launched the website in May. First mentoring session took place, and then we, as part of our connection pillar, we put on Wednesday webinars, which involved industry experts to create conversation and also to keep the engagement on the relevant topics, the relevant things that was going on in the industry. And then July, we incorporated as a non-profit organization, volunteer run. And then it was apparent that pilots, through the mentoring, so what we've done over our evolution is taken feedback from the pilots and evolved what we offer the program. But we got accredited by the DWP to provide, which we're funded to provide the pilot training, qualification, the licensing, the revalidations. So that kept the pilots qualified legally for another year or so. So just these different investments in various aspects of the pilot's life, it started to help them develop and improve. January 2021, so almost a year ago, we set up a core team. And then, really importantly, our virtual scenario-based training was launched, which, if you remember from the central competency pillar, it's becoming our flagship learning and development tool, which you'll get a little taste of in a second with Matt. Now, to complement that, we've got a resource hub, because what the pilots do is they figure out what behaviors they need developing, then they go to the resource hub or the mentoring and coaching and develop those behaviors. So they're building in resilience into each of those behaviors. So that's where the evidence base comes in. We then set a partnership with the Centre for Aviation Psychology, which is actually one of the top global peer support organizations for airlines. They provide us with more structured support if the pilots are starting to struggle and are unable to figure out themselves. You know, with a mentor and a coach, they might need a bit of therapy, maybe some counselling. So that's the relationship that we provide there. And we were delighted to start with the EMCC. I'll tell you a little story about that. Now, I was actually researching the EMCC before I met Sam, and Sam came along fairly early on, 2 or 3 months after we'd founded Resilient Pilot. And I was very interested. And what I was interested in is the blended mentoring coaching approach, because I was looking at the ICF and other various coaching organizations that were just coaching. But we actually started off as mentors and then evolved into coaching. And we offer that blended approach. And that's our real key pillar for us. So I was speaking about it, and Sam said, "Oh, well, I'm a master, whatever it is, practitioner, and actually deliver the EQA training." I was like, so our worlds were meant to collide. So I was delighted that Sam joined us by coincidence, but it enabled us to actually go down the road with the EMCC and start that process of accreditation. 70 mentors, we've had about 70 mentors consistently, and which is quite a nice number for us to manage as a non-profit. Any more, we'd need, I think we'd need some administrative staff, but we managed it with about 70. And then in May 2021, we started the ISMCP, which was a lot of work, which Sam primarily led. and we're very grateful. It took us 12 months, of course, and Johanna's been involved with that. A number of people, actually. Karen was involved with it, but Sam certainly got us over the line, so thank you for that. And then we got some interest from AFAP, which is the Australian Federation of Air Pilots, developing a partnership to support their pilots down under who they're still slightly, but about 6 to 8 months behind the recovery than we are. So there's a bit of a lag, which we're supporting their resilience development. New director team, we saw them. It was important for us to get a new director team in January 2022 because we shifted from a reactive support organisation in the pandemic to a proactive resilience development looking forward organisation to invest in behaviours, build resilience, and essentially pioneer continuous personal professional development. And the team we've got now is excellent to shape that going forwards. The CBTI training, now that's where we started to really look at behaviours, professional behaviours. So you'll see in a minute that we have a virtual pioneering immersive scenario-based training where we put 2 pilots in the simulation seat. A CBTI means a competence-based training instructor. They deliver the scenario that Matt has helped create for his software, and we've been trained as qualified CBTIs. It's almost like a virtual coach, but that coach and mentor is trained in those behavioral sets. So there's 73 behaviors and 9 pilot competencies, so we can observe and train with that. And absolutely delighted, May 2022, we got that gold standard, which we absolutely wasn't expecting. And it just, and we came back with 96%, I think, and it was actually outstanding effort, and we're very proud of that as we celebrated our 2nd birthday. We moved over from that supported, current connected to building confidence, competence, connections to fit it. And that is the definition of resilience as is defined by Airbus training and also the pilot. We've got an organisation called the International, the Pilot Training Task Force, which is a huge organisation that looks at resilience development. So then CEA, which is the UK regulator, funded resilience development for 20 pilots who've just finished training to help them keep their engagement and keep those competencies going. Last week, we were in person at the European Aviation Training Symposium for the launch of a resilience hub, which will be the centre of all that development. So in your mentoring and coaching, and also with some evidence-based software, you'll actually identify which behaviours need developing, and you use the Resilience Hub to further that development. Thank you for inviting us here. We're at the Global Summit, Providers Summit. It's a real pleasure. And later on, I'll just talk about the Resilience Hub, the future of Resilient Pilot. Some stats for you. I won't go into too much of it, but we have over 70 mentors, 25 mental health first aiders, 5,000 members on the website, 8,200 followers on LinkedIn, about 300 mentees that have direct, full mentoring and coaching.
So what I'm going to do now is going to bring in a word cloud in just a moment, because what we're interested in is how do you develop resilience in your organisation? So just like Stu's been talking there about how we've developed it, how do you develop it in your organisation? That's what we're really interested in. So let me just bring in this particular quiz, if you like, and I'm going to pop into chat for you, so Stu kind of carries on talking in regards to, I'd like you to join this poll, and what it will create is a word cloud, and what we need is 1 word per answer. Oh, deliberately, nice. Diagnostic, interesting. Pop into chat. How did you do that in regards to being diagnostic? Community, nice. Very much what we did, isn't it, Stu? To be honest, we got the community together and we shared with each other. Listening, nice. Togetherness. If you're having any problems, just let me know. But please just keep them coming, because the more words that we get, the more that this is going to build. That togetherness again, understanding, support, connection. Ooh, robustly. Wow, some great words here, Stu. Keep it coming. So support now. So the more that you type in a certain word from different people, the bigger it will get. So look at what's happening now to support. Look at what I talked about right at the very beginning in regards to how did we diversify to support our people within an organisation, etc. People need that support. I love that word, authenticity. That is awesome. Listening, yeah. Seeking first to understand. Let's listen to our people. What is it that they need? Variety as well. Thank you, Zoe. No problem. I will add it for you. There we go. I've added it for you. How's that? Fantastic. Culture.
Yes. Culture and trust.
Yeah. I think when you've got an industry, whether it be hospitality, whether it be whoever it is, you know, it's like little families, aren't they? And I think when the chips are down, shall we say, I think those families really come together. And I think this is exactly why Stu and Karen did what they did right at the very beginning, because they were right in the heart of it. Absolutely. Don't worry if you can't access. Yeah, don't worry. I can absolutely pop it in for you. Don't you worry. Okay, that's building nicely. I will continue to let that build whilst Stu carries on and tells you a little bit more about our organisation, which is fantastic. So I'll just go back to the slides now.
Some great words there. Okay, so in our world of aviation, we have in Europe an organisation called EASA, European Aviation Safety Agency, which is like the regulator, you know, the governing framework. They design the rules, the implementation, and actually since Brexit, let's not say the word, but since Brexit, the UK has obviously departed EASA, but we still, for the next year, align and work in accordance with those regulations. And this is one of the safety initiatives that came out of the European Aviation Safety Plan. Organizational resilience is a key factor in managing a safe operation. Resilience comprises the system's ability to withstand those disturbances, challenges, and changes. But importantly, and this is the one that we hang our hat on, is the positive contribution to safety of each and every staff member is a key component in an organization and a system resilience. So the system needs to have resilience, but the individual is a hugely important key component. And that's what we're building. That's what we're developing here. Now, let's say you have an individual pilot who goes through some kind of training. We have recurrent training at least every year, some airlines, every 6 months. But let's say it's an annual training program where you get to go in a simulator, you get to do some training with your colleagues, some team building and stuff. But you've just done that, you build your resilience, and then that's it for a year. So you get the red line coming down. You do the same, you build that resilience, and then the resilience starts to decay. Now, in this case, that pilot might have had some problems, some personal problems, which has knocked their confidence. And what our program does, the Resilience Development Program, is it, through the mentoring, through the coaching, through peer support, or through your CBTI, identifies the key behaviours as an evidence base for you to develop. So therefore, you move through. Resilient Pilot has come in here. And by way of that continuous investment or that continuous development, you smooth off that sawtooth effect. So rather than having the red line dropping again and then going through the same thing, you've got a smoothing of your resilience development, hopefully in a positive sense, through all the various virtual activities. And that's a resilience development program, which we've evolved, we've iterated, we've improved, and we've constantly enhancing in adding various bits and bobs. But essentially, it's a monthly program which involves mentoring, coaching, scenario-based training workshops, and a resilience hub. Essentially to build the behaviors, personal behaviors, so those human factor behaviors, and also those professional behaviors, which we have a 9 competency set of 73. If we can focus on those personal behaviors, we bring ourselves in a readiness, optimum position to perform effectively and safely in that professional environment. Now, me and Matt are going to do a bit of role play here. So what we do is we have some software. We actually virtually put the pilots into the seat. Now, it's not quite like Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's more about the behaviors. So imagine you've got the 2 pilots. We've got one today. We've got me and Matt. I'll play the CBTI instructor. Matt's going to be the student, but he's playing the captain role. I'll play the first officer and everything else. And you'll see this blended approach of instruction, coaching, mentoring going on. And then we have a debrief at the end and use some software to actually objectively observe and record and classify and grade the performance of the pilot with that session. These are called competence development scenarios, basically virtual scenario-based training. Right, so this is our virtual scenario-based training. Now, me and Matt have been through this before, but essentially what we do is we have a brief with the pilots. And we go through what the virtual scenario is all about today. In this case, it's going to be an aircraft coming into Gatwick in low visibility, which means fog, basically, which brings its challenges. And the idea is you're presented with a situation, a dilemma situation, where there is no real right or wrong answer. You've just got to go through a process of interacting as human beings, as professionals, communicating, prioritizing, time management, making decisions, and also being effective as a leader in this case, which Matt is going to show you. So what we do is, I'll skip through these screens. We basically give a bit of refresher knowledge for the pilots because they may have been out of the loop for a little bit of time. And we then start the actual virtual scenario, which we're going to go through now. Cool. All right, so we're going to go through the scenario. So I'm going to play the instructor, but also the first officer. Matt's the captain. And we'll go through the scenario and come up with a solution. It's going to be about 5 minutes, this. So observe the behaviors, observe the way that the instructor, myself, sort of coaches and interacts. So I'm just going to scrub the video. So this is coming into land at Gatwick, about 2,000 feet. And we'll just go near to the end. And myself and Matt, this is just a normal day, but something happens. Okay, Matt, what's just happened?
Okay, so looking at here, it's come up with a failure. And it's saying that we've lost engine 1, which we can see from our screen there on the left. And what we would do is we would back that up with some information. So if you look that the gauges on the left-hand side are showing less, so we would agree that it's not false information. We do have an engine failure.
Excellent. What's the priority then for this for us?
So our priority here is going to be obviously to fly the aircraft, which is always our first priority. Yeah. Excellent.
Okay then. So we've paused the scenario. So what sort of options have we got?
Well, I guess there's 2 options really. We could try and get the engine secured. So it's obviously broken, so we're not going to get it started again. But we could either try and get it fixed before we land and continue the landing, or we can go around. There are 2 options.
Yeah, and what about the fuel here? Is that an issue at the minute?
We've got a little bit of extra fuel because we would normally be landing with maybe 2 tons, 2.2 tons in this point. So we've got about a ton extra, which is, given that it's foggy, is about normal. You'd take an extra a ton to allow for that.
Yeah.
So at this stage, I wouldn't say that we're in any sort of urgency. There's plenty of fat built into the system there, but we're pretty low. 600 feet is unrealistic that we'd probably get this fixed by the time we were going to land.
Exactly. So what's your feeling then? What's your
I would go
thoughts?
around in this
Go
one.
around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Should we try that then?
Yeah.
Go around means, of course, that the aircraft discontinues the approach, and it's, in this case, we found it was safer to do so. Okay. What's next then, Matt?
Okay, so obviously we're going around, and I would be actually flying the go around and making sure I follow the procedure correctly. But in this case, with the scenario, I guess we can start looking at what our options are. So if we could have a look at some of the resources then. Let's have a look at the weather then. What options do we have?
Maybe just explain for the...
Yeah, so this is all aviation language. So this is what our weather looks like. So to us, it's a bit like the Matrix film. Yeah, so to you, it's just staring at a load of numbers, but that means something to us. Effectively, what it's saying is that to go back into Gatwick, which is EGKK, very confusing. They made Luton GW, which you would think would be Gatwick, but it's not. GW is Luton. Yeah, so for Gatwick, with one engine, we have slightly less ability to land in fog. And looking at that Gatwick weather, that is basically at our limit, so we couldn't go any lower than that.
Exactly, yeah.
Luton is slightly better, so we've got a little bit of spare capacity there. We've added, this wouldn't be in real life, but we've added there that the minimum that's required plus 50 feet. So we've got a little bit of extra. So the cloud is 50 feet higher than we need for that one. Or we've got Liverpool in the north of the UK, which is a bit further away where the weather's a bit better. And you can see that it's overcast at 700 feet and we need it to be 200 feet. So we've got 500 feet of extra cloud there.
Italy in 1-2 Bravo, direct to Mayfield to hold.
Direct to Mayfield to hold. 0-1 Bravo. Yeah, so there are 3 options basically. We've got poor weather here, marginal weather at Luton, or a bit further away we've got good weather in Liverpool.
Excellent. And so should we do a TDODA then and see what
yeah, sure,
we can get out of that? So how much time do you think we've got, Matt? TDODA is it's an acronym for a decision-making tool that we do as pilots. So yeah, how much time do you think we've got based on the fuel flow?
Okay, so let's have a look. If you could bring up the resources again, we'll have a look at the flight plan, because that also has all our fuel calculations on. Again, this is all going to be a different language to you, but I can look at that and see that if we're looking at the fuel, so we've got 2.2 tons for Luton. I don't know if you want to put your cursor on that 2.2 tons there, Stuart. So that tells us our minimum fuel to go to Luton. So we've got 3 tons. So we've got about 800 kilos until we would have to go to Luton, worst case. If we wanted to go to Liverpool, which is where it says number 2 down there, under there. Yeah. So we can see that if you go, I mean, this is all just our language that you think, but it says difference there to the right of that column.
Yeah.
If you want to put the cursor there. So to get to Liverpool, it's going to be an extra 560 kilos. So I did have 800 kilos. If I want to go to Liverpool, then I've got 600 extra to lose off that. So now I've only got 200 kilos to get to Liverpool. So if I want to go to Liverpool, or if we want to go to Liverpool, should I say, then we need to go very quickly.
Yes.
If we want to go to Luton, we've got a little bit of extra time.
Excellent. So that's the T, isn't it? So the time bit. So the D, so the diagnosis. Are you happy what's happened, or is there anything else hiding that we haven't spotted yet? So there's the status, basically.
Yes. So we've got the status page there, which is where you've got the blue, green, and orange writing that tells us a
Just
summary
here.
of the status of the aircraft.
Yeah.
Um,
And the
So,
pilots
yes.
will be able to make a decision based upon this. You know, they'll know what systems they haven't got and what systems they've got remaining.
Yeah. And where you can see on the left in green, it says Cat 3 single only. Again, that's in aviation language. That's what I was talking about, where it says if you're single engine, you can't do such a high fidelity auto land. So that's why we've got less ability to go back into Gatwick.
Okay,
So-
so the final bit then, sorry, normally we'd have a bit more time, but just
Yeah.
real quick, the final bit is the D, the decide, and then we assign the tasks and we review. So if we do the D bit, which is decide, what's your gut feeling? What do you think the best options would be?
Okay.
'Cause then
So
what plan would you have, obviously?
I think what we should do is, for those of you who don't know the sort of map or the area, I guess you could bring the map up, Stuart. If we was to look at where these airports are, we could actually, I think we should go to Luton,
Yeah.
and then if we get to Luton and the weather deteriorates so that we don't think we can get in, then we'll
Yeah.
continue on up to Liverpool. So we've actually got both options
Mhm.
available to us.
Excellent.
I think if
I
we
think that's a
go
great
back
plan.
into Gatwick
Yeah.
now, I think it's too much risk that we don't get in, and then we can't go to Liverpool because we've used that.
Yeah.
200
Use the
kilos
fuel.
up.
Yeah, it's that risk reward, isn't it? So we,
Yeah.
you know, what are the risks in going to Gatwick? Yeah, it's the closest one, but we've actually got fuel to get to Liverpool. But and so you're saying that you should decide then go to Luton, try it, and then we've got a bit.
Yes.
We
That's
might just
my-
have a bit of fuel to go to Liverpool if not.
That's my decision. Yeah.
Excellent. Cool. So we're going to go to Luton. So we'll trickle off to Luton. We'll get the pilots now to sort of do a review. You know, they assign the task, do the review, do the role play. So it'll be Resilient 1-2 Bravo. You are cleared onto heading of 360 degrees to intercept the ILS at Luton.
So this is just scrub along. So
Yeah, and it moves along. And so basically, you'll see that. Let me just stop the share there. It's a whole decision-making process, and we will facilitate, we'll mentor, we'll coach. Sometimes you'll just sit back because they're doing such a great job. You don't need to input or facilitate anything. You just watch and you observe. And what we do then is we actually write down, we use quantum. I know we're running out of time, Sam, so I won't go into too much, but we actually use some software, some evidence-based software called Quantum. What I'm doing now is, with Matt, is I'm writing notes down. I'll just stop that. And the notes go into the evidence-based training software called Quantum from Use Before Flight. So I've got Matt on here. I'm doing some notes, and we can objectively then, for this session, so here it was you can objectively write down. So actually Matt was great open communication.
I paid him to say that.
Great open communication, and it's actually inclusive, and actually listen to my input, listen to inputs. And what I do then is I go and classify. Do you remember there's 73 behaviors for pilots? So open communication, I'll just drop down here. Communication, it's actually on leadership and teamwork, this for some reason. It's leadership and teamwork. And you've got that behavior here. Encourages team participation, open communication, that's a green. Listen to inputs, that's under communication, listens actively and demonstrates understanding. So as you can see, I'll make my observations, and then afterwards we have a debrief based upon the objective behaviors, and then I'll grade whatever behaviors I've seen. There might be some points for, development, the development bits, not in this case, but say Matt just needed to potentially select appropriately when and how and whom to communicate with. It's a bit disjointed. We can then actually facilitate and mentor and coach that behavior. So, okay, what are you going to do differently this time in the debrief? How are you going to just time what and when and how you communicate? What are you going to do? What strategies have you got to develop that behavior going forwards? And that's the evidence-based system. And the pilot actually has this record, and we'll be able to see the progression going forwards based upon that scenario-based training, learning and development opportunity.
Has anyone got any questions about that. Someone's asking about, Stuart, is my understanding correct that the basis of the program is pilot training and mentoring coaches underpinning those training to ensure sustainability and continuity of the learning?
Yeah, and I'd go so far as training and development, because yes, there are some training elements there, but it's actually you've got a competency set with 73 behaviours. The idea these days is we're not training for the task and the manoeuvres anymore. We're training the behaviours to deploy for any unforeseen circumstances. So within your operational environment, if you can deploy the 73 behaviours effectively, you should be able to successfully have a successful outcome for any situation that you face.
And, it's not, these scenarios and using these competencies don't have to be used just in pilot training. My software is used by, for example, a district nursing trust where they want to show nurses, you presented with this situation. This example was domestic violence. So they've gone into a house, and what would you do? Would you sit in this chair? How would you deal with the husband that's showing aggression, etc., etc.? Or another company have used the software when they're doing the recruitment. So you go through the scenario and you're asked a question in a interview situation, and there's different options, and as you can see, you can add all different resources in and everything. So it's a very adaptable piece of software that can be used in any industry. But the competencies, some of them of course are specific to aviation, but as a generalization, most of them can be adapted to any industry, particularly the medical industry, where there's a lot now of aviation competencies that are being brought across.
Got some great comments in chat as well. So thank you for all of your comments, sort of saying how impressed you were. It's a great system, it really is, and it really provides great support for the pilots too. So thank you for that. Thanks to Matt and to Stu for showing us that as well. So let's move back into the presentation and another couple of questions and a few more bits to show you as well. One of the things, of course, we're here on the EMCC Global Provider Summit, and like Stu mentioned before, why did we choose the EMCC? Because Stu was looking at lots of different providers. But what we really wanted to do was make sure that we had a coaching approach to mentoring, and that has really served us very well. We get Johanna in just a few moments is going to be talking about actually some of the research that we've done in regards to sort of asking our mentees, etc. What is it that they get kind of gain from the program? What is it that they need? So it's been really interesting. But from the EMCC perspective, of course, there are pilot competencies, the 70-odd pilot competencies. There are 8 EMCC competencies. Fastest finger first. Which is the first of the 8 EMCC competencies? Let's see who can remember. Nicola, you're not allowed. Neither are you, Joanna. Here we go, Madeline. It might well be a chocolate mouse for Madeline. Absolutely. I just wanted to see if anybody else had any other thoughts. Oh, there's a smiley face gone in. Absolutely. Yeah, there are 8 EMCC competencies, but what we actually started to recognise, where's the chocolate mouse? I'll send it in the post. What we started to recognise actually was how they dovetail into those pilot competencies that we've just mentioned just a few moments ago, and into something else which I'm going to share with you in just a moment. So when we started to look at how actually we had formed the company, the organisation Resilient Pilot, how we were already interacting with our mentees, etc. This was just such a natural process, and it flowed beautifully into it. That's when, like Stu said, we started to upskill our mentors, and by putting them through the EQA program, so they would then achieve the EIA certification themselves, which we're still working through with some of our mentors as well. All of the, pretty much all of the directorship team, well, all of them have been through the program, and the vast majority of us are already accredited anyway. But when we look at each of these competencies, it just gives us that opportunity to really compartmentalise exactly what it is that we are doing. But what we also recognised was one of the other bodies that forms aviation is called IATA. And they have some competencies, which I'll share with you in just a moment. These are the instructor and evaluator competencies. And we noticed that there was an alignment with them. So it kind of just did this. It just dovetailed beautifully into one another. Now, understanding self, which is, of course, competency number 1 for the EMCC, these are the competencies I have listed down here on the left. The IATA competencies, even though they aren't 1, 2, 3, 4 in the same sense, actually from various different competencies, we selected the ones that we felt really sort of entwined into the EMCC competencies, and it works beautifully. So I've just given you one example here on how we feel that it aligns not only to develop that resilience within our pilots, but of course also, well, their professional behaviours as well. So this is the 8 EMCC competencies that everybody on this call will be familiar with. But the IATA competencies, when we start to have a look, the pilot competencies is exactly what Stu and Matt have just done there. The IATA management of learning of the environment, we'll look at the competencies there on the left on how straight away that kind of just intertwines. The instruction competencies, look at the approach that Stu took there in regards to when he was going through that scenario with Matt. It was very facilitative. It was a coaching approach. Stu was asking great questions. You know, what are your options? What happened? What's the priority? Those are great questions to start to ask to get that mentee to think. So we do it through a coaching approach, which works beautifully. Interaction with the trainees. Well, how do we do that? So every single CDS that is created, they're all different scenarios. They will bring up different behaviours and, of course, different elements for that particular individual to start to notice. And, of course, that assessment and evaluation, the quantum software. So if we're just even talking about the CDS, never mind anything else that it is that we've been doing, it just works beautifully to really develop that particular individual. We're developing the whole person, not just one element of it. But of course, there's a bit more to the EMCC than just those 8 competencies for the coach and the mentor. There's also the ISMCP framework. Now, when we decided that we were going to go and get the organisational accreditation for the ISMCP, and we started that process, we were absolutely blown away in regards to how and what it is that it showed us. One, what we were doing brilliantly, and you know what we already had in place for just been around for a year, the work that had gone into that, but also what were the gaps? And this was what we noticed. So when me, Stu and Karen started this process back in sort of May 2021, which seems like forever ago now, we started to recognise that actually the framework for the ISMCP accreditation was also setting us up to succeed as well. Now, these are the 6 competency frameworks for that accreditation. Clarity of purpose. So what we did, we already had a vision, but we tweaked it. We changed it. Things started to develop just by going through this process. We already had a team contract. That changed. We ensured sustainability because we actually were more future focused. We were only meant to be around for 6 months. 2.5 years later, we're getting some real traction now and really future focus in our organisation. We also identified actually that the mentees had CPD needs, hence why things like the CDS that you've just seen there were developed. The stakeholder training and the briefing, the EIA that we were putting people through. We created the director team, etc. So what Stu has just done now, you have to go through training called a CBTA training or CBTI training. That allows you to be able to score and observe those behaviours. So we've put people through that. We've now got a 20-strong team where they will be able to do those scenarios, just like we've seen with Matt. Mental health, first aid, etc. Really important. We're talking about well-being, massively important in regards to our mentors actually recognise maybe the signs where an individual isn't okay. What help do we need to then get in place for that particular individual? The process for matching and selecting. How do a mentee meet a mentor? Well, we've got a process for that. Thankfully, we already had a great process in place. We've tweaked that as well. But then what happens when that mentee has a shift in need? How do we actually change the mentor then to suit their needs to make sure that they're getting the support that they need? That measurement and review. Well, Surveys. We've been sending surveys out pretty much right from the very beginning, because we really needed to hear not just from the mentors, but from the mentees. And MRD sessions, which is the mental reflection and development sessions, which Johanna's going to talk about in just a moment. The volunteer charter. All of our individuals that are part of our organisation are all volunteers. They give their time for free. We coach, we mentor for free. And we had to have a volunteer charter to make sure actually we were all in the same boat. We're all on the same page as well. And that's worked brilliantly. Global Code of Ethics, EMCC competencies, we work with it all. And that admin and support back to the MRD, that mental reflection and development, that's all about, well, it's peer support basically for our mentors to make sure that they're a safe pair of hands. Johanna will talk about that in a moment. We had individuals coming into us from a Kickstart program. They were doing lots of admin for us. It was fantastic. And they were also, a vast majority of them, they were also trainee pilots. And we put in policies, I think I've spelled policies wrong, and process as well. So actually, the ISMCP accreditation, even though it took us 12 months to complete that accreditation process, it showed us brilliantly what we already have and what we actually needed to do next. So I'd be interested to see, or to hear from you, how do you think going through that process of ISMCP accreditation, how do you think that framework could support your organisation? And please pop that into chat as well. I love the commonality that ISMCP offers. Yeah, definitely. It really focused us on areas pushing in the same direction. Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you for that, Nicola. Imagine it acts like a guide. It certainly does, Madeline. Yeah. It did, and that's exactly what it did. So under each of those competencies, there are certain things, certain evidences that you have to provide. So it's not quite as simple as that's the one competence. It really drills down into each of those elements. And it was really, really great process to go through. So I'm going to hand over to Johanna now in regards to, well, what have we learned through our sort of 2 years, 2.5 years of being around? So Johanna.
Thank you, Sam. I guess there's two things to say here. Just like any other growing organisation, when you look back, there are things that you notice, either that tickled you at the time or bugged you at the time or foxed you at the time, and we're no exception to that. And the second thing is, I think as the newbie to the party, it's easier for me to have listened to the experiences of my fellow resilient pilot directors and just kind of pick out, perhaps with more clarity than they might be able to when they're sort of immersed in it, what we've learned as a result. So if you can flick on for me. And we've been somewhat cute in all of our design because we've included the EMCC competencies. And in fact, what we did when we looked at what we've learned, we were able to align them to the EMCC competencies there. So hopefully those headings will be super familiar to you. I think the key thing for us to recognize is what it's like to manage a wholly volunteer workforce. And I see many organizations kind of wrestle with this. You are without some of the levers that you use with an employed workforce. And I don't just mean the remunerative kind, I mean the sort of terms and conditions or terms of reference and things like that. So one of the things that we've learned is, how do you encourage a volunteer workforce to carry on giving of their time and carry on doing things the way that you would like to do them, particularly as you've heard that resilient pilots kind of raison d'etre or way of doing business has changed over the years. And how do you manage a workforce where, you know, they liked what you're originally about, but they're not so keen on where you're heading next, or actually the sheer reality of, yay, the aviation industry is recovering a bit, and what do you do when your volunteers are no longer as available? How do you maintain that level of service to folks who want the coaching and mentoring when your current volunteers are a little bit less available? The IP challenges there is because we've co-created and collaborated in a lot of the things that we're doing, we've never had to worry before about whose brain it came out of, whose brainchild it was. But of course, as we go forward, and particularly when we start to add on the commercial angle, worrying about appropriately citing responsibility and accreditation or crediting those who come up with the idea, that's obviously something that we're now wrestling with. We've talked about how the ISMCP process helped us diagnose and improve our own internal processes. And also then it's given us an indicator as well about where we want to go in the future. Obviously, we've had to be really careful about managing mentee confidentiality. We're not a formal organisation in that sense, so we've had to put in processes around the side so that we use actually mentee codes to refer to our mentees rather than their names. Actually, their names and other confidential details are held in a very secure area, which only 2 people can access, and the rest of it is done through codes. And I've mentioned there about the volunteer capacity and availability in particular. You know, in some respects, we applaud our lovely pilots as they get more busy back in the cockpit. But on the other hand, it does pose us a challenge as an organisation to know what capacity we have available to provide to our burgeoning desire for mentoring. I've sort of hinted on this a bit about as the organisation is changing its direction, that you're going to get people who either don't buy into that future vision or don't want to be a part of it. So it's kind of, how do you manage the direction of travel that we want to take Resilient Pilot, but at the same time still keep our fabulous bunch of advocates and cheerleaders and obviously the volunteer mentors along with us as we go on that road. We've talked about how important it is that everyone is a safe pair of hands, that what we do is not only safe, but everything that in the way that we do things is safe as well. And that's obviously something that we're learning as we go, particularly with the ISMCP process that helps us come to get to grips with that. One of the things we've been really, or certainly I was surprised at, is how big the iceberg is when it comes to wellbeing in an aviation, and how actually, in the nicest possible way, the sector can be somewhat behind other sectors in worrying about the wellbeing of its pilots, or indeed how open the conversation can or cannot be when it comes to wellbeing in aviation, and us in particular wanting to keep that in the forefront of our mind as an outcome that helps people kind of get bit more cool with talking about the fact that, particularly if you've just had your raison d'etre, your reason for getting out of bed in the morning pulled away from you as a result of the aviation crash, if you like, what is that doing to us and our psychology and our sense of who we are? We're trying as much as possible to introduce models and techniques into how we induct our mentors, how we induct our mentees, how we conduct some of our training and some of our facilitation of the stuff that we do. And then, of course, we've talked about the evaluation. So we evaluate both ourselves, and we'll touch base on that in mentor reflection and development in terms of how do we measure the quality of the service that we're providing, but also how we use surveys to help us understand what's going on both in our mentee and our mentor population. So that's the sort of stuff we've been learning on the way. This is an output from one of our most recent mentee surveys, and you can see there how actually the COVID was very detrimental to things like mental health, social interaction, flying confidence and the like. So for me, what this tells us that even now, the demand for our services is still very high, as people are still, if you like, reeling or recovering from some of this impact. And certainly the folks I speak to, if you're in a, and I won't get this language right, and Stu will raise an eyebrow at me, but if you're in a large carrier like BA or something like that, you're probably seeing some recovery more quickly than in some, no, the other way around. If you're in one of the smaller airlines, budget airlines, you might be seeing the recovery slightly more quickly than the carrier airline. So we might still have quite a large population out there still feeling the effects. And this is great news for us, because what it basically says is more mentoring, please. And we would love to be able to facilitate that and carry on delivering that. And that's one of the reasons we're being quite careful with our, if you like, our not-for-profit status, is we're able to plough some of our commercial activity back into the ability for us to provide free mentoring and coaching. If you're not aware of the power of mentoring or coaching, of course, you don't feel the need to pay for it. So what we're trying to do is generate that awareness of what mentoring and coaching, the power of mentoring and coaching, by providing it for free, and then we can start to change the narrative around it. So this is a question that we ask always, is all organizations, if you've got coaching and mentoring in your organization, how do you ensure they are a safe pair of hands? It's super important to us that everything that we do is safe, and that we're not inadvertently making some of the wellbeing issues worse, or ignoring some of the wellbeing issues. But I guess the question for you as our co-collaborators today is, what do you do in your organizations to ensure they're safe pairs of hands? I'm going to pause for a second and see if there's anyone who wants to come off mute and share their experience, or just drop something in the chat. Or shall I, conscious of time, trip along? What do you reckon, Sam?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? Because we've worked really hard on this. It's not just, ensuring that the mentees are in safe pairs of hands. It's also the mentors and how it is that we have ensured that they have that safe space as well. And it's quite interesting. There you go, Nicola has popped in, saying ensure that they are accredited. I would say that, obviously. So would I, Nicola.
Well, I think there's two parts, right? The first one is trained, the second one is accredited. I think the first one is a must, the second one, is also a must, but supervision, absolutely. And I think that's where we sort of took the things, and we'll kind of share a bit more about our own sense of journey as well. Sam, if you want to slide us on again. So I run the mentor reflection and development sessions. We deliberately call them MRD and not supervision, because actually for the most part, we split ourselves into two bodies of mentors, the technical and the non-specialist. So myself and Sam are non-specialist mentors. We're not aviators by background, so we tend to focus more on the human side of the performance rather than the aviator side of the performance, if you like. And as a result of which, because our mentors span those sorts of specialists and non-specialists, we felt the calling it supervision might not be appropriate. But this is our version of supervision. Now, I am a senior practitioner accredited with the EMCC. I'm not an accredited supervisor, but nonetheless, I follow the two protocols. In our mentor reflection and development sessions, we use the EMCC core competencies as kind of a measurement or a yardstick for the stuff that we're doing in our mentoring and coaching practice. And I also use the EMCC supervision competencies to guide my practice as I run and facilitate those mentor reflection development sessions. I'm also an action learning set facilitator trained. So I use that as my method of delivering on these. So what you can see here is, if you like, thematic analysis on some of the conversations I've been having in the MRD sessions for the last, I'm trying to think how long I've been doing that now, 12, 18 months, something like that. And unsurprisingly, none of this stuff will be a stranger to you if you are an accredited coach and mentor. Either you've brought this stuff yourself or you've seen it be brought by other people in your supervision practice. And in fact, although in the sessions, what I don't do is go, ooh, this is EMCC competence number 1 here. Nonetheless, I will use the language which says, well, I'm wondering, how this is showing up in the contracting, or I'm wondering what this is doing to the relationship you have with the with the mentee and things like that. We always talk about being person-centered, not problem-centered. And certainly you will have heard Sam there talking about coaching and mentoring the whole person, not just the person that presents with the challenge. So for me, this is about me holding these competencies in my head and using them to facilitate the conversation with the mentor in terms of how things are going for them, and allowing them, as Sam said. So I say that and I've borrowed this from my own supervisor, that the MRD has 3 purposes: restorative, giving us back. And I know, Sam, certainly you've pitched up for one when you've had a red flag or an amber flag, which is our way of identifying when somebody is in particular needs due to their well-being status. Normative, which is making sure that we maintain certain standards in accordance with the EMCC competencies, and then formative, which is in particular where we spend a lot of our time, which is building new competence. And you'll see there in the use of models and techniques, the GROW model, and also something which, again, I've borrowed from somebody else called Stokers, which is how you might tee up a conversation, a contracting mnemonic, basically, to allow you to make sure you're having the most effective conversations.
What's next for RP? Well, as you've seen, a lot of work's happened in 2.5 years. We've got to, evolved and integrated the EMCC. Plus, you can see the instructor competencies. So we've got this blended framework that we offer. So the pilots themselves have a personal countermeasure framework and a competency framework, and us as mentor coaches, trainers, have this blended IATA and EMCC competencies. So it's competency, virtual evidence-based, competency-based development for the mentor, the coaches, and also for the pilots. We asked the question to our pilots recently: what do you want us to do in the future? Or what do you wish we were doing that we're not doing? So we'll take a few of these things and actually looking at aviation schools, which is where where my passion is, actually looking at the next generation of training and development for pilots, potential pilots, next generation aviators, new regulations. Cadet World means those new training pilots, self-training, training workshops, which we've implemented. So all these great things we're going to take and move forward with. This is our model. I was going to put it at the start, but I thought we'd leave it to the end to bring it all together. We use a process in the aviation world called threat and error management and undesired states. The more threats you can identify, the much more awareness you've got of your surroundings, what's going on. The further down the model, you start to create errors within the operational context, the flight errors. You've got to manage those by deploying the competencies. You could put the aircraft into an undesired state or actually an accident, which is right at the bottom of the model. So we take that model and transfer it to your personal threats, personal errors, personal undesired states. And we ask the pilots, where are you? Which personal countermeasures, through mentoring, through coaching, through training development, do you need to focus on to deploy to build your resilience in one of the three key pillars, and to build your personal confidence, to build your competence, build connection? And what we're doing there is you're building adaptive capacity in each and every one of those behaviors, so that when the time comes, or if the time comes, you can deploy them effectively with buoyancy and obviously, be a resilient pilot. Just to recap on all those activities on the next slide, we build competence. So quantum, we've got a quick look at that, but actually the pilots can use that to look at a framework of 30 personal countermeasures, such as managing nutrition, fitness, relationships, sleep, fatigue. So all the key personal countermeasures, which are actually transferable to other industries. We've got the two workshops, competency workshops, and you've just seen the virtual scenario-based training to build competence. Next slide is building connections. Again, the Resilience Hub is the central piece which brings together as an learning management system for the pilots to go off and develop those behaviors based upon them identifying through the mentoring, coaching, or self-assessment. Networking, virtual networking, it's always available. And webinars and virtual events, just as you're hosting. Really important to keep that connection. And the confidence bit is where the coaching, the mentoring, the peer support comes into play for that personal building, personal confidence building for the pilot. Bring the pilot confident to the operation, you should have a really effective, performing, resilient pilot. And as I said before, we partnered up with Talent Aviation and with the government as part of Generation Aviation, a new program to inspire the next generation. We want to take this learning development model to 11-year-olds, put them on a virtual mentored coaching program for a pilot, for cabin crew, for a traffic controller, solve the problem of the 20-year shortage that's coming up, global shortages according to the International Civil Aviation Authority, and also inspire young people from disadvantaged areas that have financial barriers, that are very talented, a very talented pool of potential pilots from all walks of life, from every corner, bring them to the industry, but start developing the behaviors at a young age. My seed was planted at 8 years old. I knew I wanted to be a pilot. Why not develop the behaviors then? Through that facilitated mentoring, virtual coaching, scenario-based training approach. That's what we want to do going forwards. And I think it brings us on to a quiz that Sam's got. But just before Sam does the quiz, I'm going to close off from Robin, because I've got to dash for another meeting at 1:30. But Robin asked me to do a sort of 30-second takeaway from the insights for today. And I think one of the key words is, and what sticks in my mind, is the diversification. It's wonderful to see that organizations outside of the aviation industry, we've all done the same thing. But we're all very in-person people with mentoring and coaching, but we've diversified, and it looks like we've taken up that virtual medium to continue that development. And is it working? Yes, I think it is. And I think it's working for all the industries, particularly those industries that have competencies that you can develop and behaviors that you can develop. So from me, it's a real delight to be here. Thank you for having us. And do get in touch. I know Sam's got a QR code at the end for you to get in touch. But essentially, for other industries, as long as you've got competencies, you can actually, and a framework, you can actually transfer this resilience development system into your industry. Because one, it's going to reduce absenteeism, it's going to increase performance, it's going to increase resilience, And also it's going to improve, if you're in safety critical industry, it's going to improve safety because the pilots are developing those behaviors that they can deploy to any situation.
Stu, thank you so much for offering that before you have to dash off. And I look forward now to the pilot quiz.
And I'm sorry I have to dash, but my grandma's over there. I brought her to Blackpool, and we're on holiday, so she's just looking at me. So I'm going to take her for a lunch now because she's been waiting all morning. Otherwise, I'll be in big trouble. But it's an absolute pleasure, and you're in wonderful hands with Sam and Johanna, and we really look forward to continuing the conversation. So thank you very much, Robin and Nicola and the team, putting on such a great provider summit. Thank you.
Thank you, Stu.
Yes, thanks a lot, Stu. There is time for others to offer reflections if they wish, but I'd like to thank you very much for doing that so efficiently, Stu.
Thank you very much. See you all again. Thank you.
Thanks, Stu.
And thanks, Sam and Johanna. Did a wonderful job.
Okay, so before we go into the Q&A, which of course we will open up, I've got 5 questions for you, which is a little quiz. So if you can log back into polev.com, it will give you the quiz. This is ready. So the username, if it was asking for a password earlier, the polev.com will take you through to the site or the app. The 123peopledev000 is the username. So that, if you like, is the password. So if you want to log into there, it will ask you then to pop your name. And if you already did it before, that's great. This is fastest finger first because I'm going to ask you 5 questions. And there's even a winner at the end. And like you said, you can win a flight to nowhere on Nothing Airlines. Unfortunately, I've got no prize for you, but it's just a bit of fun. Okay, so if you can just let me know by giving me a thumbs up in the reactions panel that is on the bottom of your toolbar. If you hover over the reactions panel, just click it, you've got a little green tick. If you could just give me a green tick in that toolbar, that would be great. I can see how many people have logged on, how many's ready. I've only got 5 logged on. Oh, 6, 7 with the thumbs up there. 7 now. Keep them coming. Okay, we'll run with who we've got. I'm just conscious of time because I want to open up for Q&A. Okay, so we'll play along. You've got 10 seconds to answer each question. So you've got to be quick. And the quicker you answer the question, Johanna, you're not allowed to play. The quicker you answer the question, the higher up the leaderboard you are going to be. So is everybody waiting for presentation? Yes, I've not started it yet. Don't worry. I've not started it yet. So it will start now. That's when it should start for you. Is that correct? Everybody should be able to see. So this is the first question. What was the month that Resilient Pilot was born? And then you've got the option there in regards to what it is that you select. So you select each of those answers or whichever one it is that you think is correct. It will give you a 10-second countdown. So the countdown has finished. You can see that on the left-hand side, bottom left-hand corner. Okay, so let's see who got this one right. Oh, 43%. And what we can see is we can see who got it right. How exciting is that? Ooh. Ronnie's in the lead. Okay, we've got a guest, got Eileen, Chris, etc. Okay, so let's go again. Next question. How many mentors does Resilient Pilot have? Fastest finger first. 50, 60, 70 or 80? Look at the countdown, bottom left-hand corner. You can see it counting down. And time is up. Let us see. 70 was correct. So well done to those of you that got that correct. Let's see who is now on the leaderboard. Oh, Ronnie, you've been taken over. Oh, it's getting exciting now. Excellent stuff. So we've got guest 659, which I think is Nicola. Lovely. Okay. So what is the 4th EMCC competency? Now we've got to know this. Come on. Come on. What is the 4th? Understanding self-managing the contract, building the relationship, or use of models and techniques. What do you reckon? Oh, time's up. If this isn't 100%. Okay, 43% got building the relationship, which of course was the correct one. Let's have a look at the leaderboard. Oh, we've had a few changes now. Look, I have no idea who's 1, 2, 3 people development. That isn't me. Okay, so we've got 659 on the top. Okay, that's right. Yeah, Total Guest is here off the last hour's content. Of course it is. What are our 3 C's? Stu's talked about these. What are they? I'll let you read them. And it's appeared on a few of our slides. So let's see who got this one correct, shall we? 100%. Thank goodness for that. Well done, everybody. Oh, we've got a new leader, which is guest 564 on the top. Lovely. Okay. Final question. What does MRD stand for? Johanna spoke about it. I've spoke about it. Okay, time is up. Let's see. Mental reflection and development. Well done. Excellent. So let's see who is on the leaderboard. Oh, we've got a few changes going on a bit further down, but guest at 564, you get a chocolate mouse. Excellent stuff. Well done. Well done, Nina. Superb. Okay, I'll take away that quiz and I'll just go back to the slides. So a little bit of fun there at the end, just to sort of see what you could remember. So what I'd like to do now is just open up for any Q&A. And I'll stop sharing just for a moment, just so we're back in plenary. Please feel free to turn your cameras on. Ask me and Johanna any questions. We will be around for the networking if anybody wishes to stay. But I'd just like to say thank you very much for all of those that you partook. Eileen, hi. What it was you? Hello. Anybody have a question?
Can I break in, Sam, because we're coming up to the past and people may want to leave.
Absolutely.
So what I would suggest is if people have questions they'd like to pose, then please stay on for the networking and pose them then, because Sam and Johanna, I think, are going to be with us. As you heard, Steve has had to leave. But I'd like just to thank them for such an enthusiastic presentation, particularly with a whizzo quiz at the end. That was just brilliant. And I was really glad that I managed to brief Steve to give his reflections before he had to go. If there are any other last reflections, I'd invite those. But then if people want to disappear, please feel free to do so now.
We will be here. Me and Johanna will be here anyway if anybody wishes to take anything. Thank you, Eileen. Oh, yes, of course, Eileen, you're over in Australia, aren't you? God bless you. Thank you for staying up late. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a great discussion. Thank you for leading it. And I think we'll continue it in the networking session.
Absolutely. There is the QR code if anybody wishes to scan the QR code and go off to our website and have a look around. And of course, you can contact us at supported@resilientpilot.com as well. So just get hold of us there if anybody wishes to do that. Okay, thank you very, very much, everybody. Thank you for attending.